Show. It's the end of the day with Ray. Hello, my friends. Well, you can see on my Clear Touch Interactive board, I got Larry Levine. Larry Levine. Everybody in the Document Imaging channel knows Larry Levine. As a matter of fact, you don't even have to be in the Document Imaging channel to know Larry Levine because he's famous all over the place, especially out there in that social world. Larry Levine, how are you doing, man? It is so great to have you on the end of the day with Ray.
Hey, Ray, what's going on? What is happening, Ray?
Well, you know, Larry, I just wanted to say that you wrote the book. How long ago did you write that book?
It's been about 2.5 years ago now, believe it or not.
Okay, the title of the book, Selling from the Heart, you can clearly see it on his credenza behind his head there. Ladies and gentlemen, I got to admit, I didn't get the hard copy book. I downloaded the version online. So sorry about that, Larry. I got the downloaded version. But
no, hey, Ray, you have it. That's all that counts, right?
You know, hey, I met you in that digital landscape, so I stayed there with you. But let me ask you something, Larry. You wrote that book three years ago, but you know, you have been the most consistent contributor of content that I've ever met in the channel. And you have written an article and published it every single Sunday, and I want you to tell me, how long has that been now that you've been doing that?
Wow, gosh, it's been since the winter of 2015. So just a little backstory on that is, as I exited out of the channel and I was deciding, you know, what's the next part of my career, Ray? One of the things that I really focused on was how do you get, and this is what I want people to really key in on, especially in the channel, is how do you get noticed in a marketplace that nobody knows you exist in? Mm-hmm. Now, you know, I spent my whole entire career in the channel in the LA marketplace. So when I stepped out and decided to launch into entrepreneurship, I had to get noticed. Mm-hmm. And I remember one day I had a conversation and I'm going to give a shout out to Ray, to a guy named Keenan, and he has a quote on the front of my book. I got into a deep conversation with him in the winter of 2015. And he goes, if you want to get noticed, you got to learn how to write. Mm-hmm. You got to learn how to write and speak to your audience. So he had asked me at that time, now I'm taking everyone back 5+ years ago. He goes, who is your audience? Well, at that time I was hyper-focused in the channel, in the copier channel. He goes, then write, consistently write and speak to your audience around the issues and challenges that they have. And I said, that's fine. I'll do it. I'll make a commitment to you. And he goes, don't make it to me, make it to yourself. There you go. From that conversation, Ray, I have written and published an article every single Sunday for the last 5+ years.
No, and that's amazing. And a lot of people, you know, here's the deal, Larry. A lot of people think this happens overnight. A lot of people think, oh, I'll just do a couple of videos and hopefully it'll be a home run. But, you know, you've been very, very consistent with it. You know, I think it was me and you that were providing, and you still do, I still do too, to Art Post's blog, you know, in the channel. And, you know, every Sunday it would show up, you know, in everybody's inbox. They could read what Larry had to say. But, you know, let me ask you a question, because I know when I started doing this, especially, you know, I don't write it and publish as much as I used to because I do a video every single day. But you know, I still try to do a couple a month. But when I started writing, and this was way back before even the video, you know, people would always ask, well, what the hell are you doing that for? How much money are you making? You know, how much money are you making writing an article? So, you know, tell us a little bit about that. And did you go through that same experience? Because it turned out to be pretty good for me. But how did that conversation go with you back in those days?
You know, it's well, first of all, I'm not afraid to try new things. Mm-hmm. So I'm going to go back to that story with Keenan, because he goes, you got to learn how to write. But I'm a big believer that salespeople can write. Mm-hmm. And this is what I want people to really key in on, is we tell ourselves, well, we can't do something. And before you know it, we believe ourselves. Mm-hmm. So instead of saying that, I said, hey, you know, I coached myself and taught myself how to write. Mm-hmm. And was it difficult? Absolutely. But you keyed in on a word and you said consistency. Mm-hmm. And it's just every single day, just jotting stuff down, taking ideas in your head. And I'd carry a notepad and I'd just start jotting ideas down, or I'd speak into my phone, or I'd write sticky notes down and then I'd write about it. You know, conversations, for instance, maybe a conversation I had with you years ago, mm-hmm. I'd write down a couple ideas, conversation I'd have with a client or a prospect. And those became the focal point of what I'd write about. Was it hard? Yes. But over time, it became a whole lot easier. If you go back to the very first articles I wrote 5 years ago, I read them and I laugh like crazy because they're so bad.
Well, Larry, I gotta say this. You know, those that have known me, you know, like in the early days of Ray, are just amazed that I can write at all because I can't spell at all. My diction's horrific. But there was a program out there called Grammarly.
Yep.
And so, for me to actually write an article and publish that for the world to see was really a brutal thing in the beginning. I mean, it used to be, I used to pay people to edit them. It was a big deal because there's no way I was ever going to be able to do it on my own through that process. But you're right. If I needed to do it, I wanted to do it. And it, like anything else, if you apply hard work and you look for resources to help you accomplish it, it's there. When did you really start monetizing your writing? I mean, obviously you wrote a book and you were able to sell the book, but tell us a little bit of history of how Larry left the channel, because there's a lot of executives looking to leave the channel. They're trying to figure out how they're going to monetize themselves as they leave. So what was that path like for you? When did Larry start getting paid for his writing?
I would say probably a year. I'd say a year plus after I'd left the channel.
And then you were invited back into the channel. I think you do some speaking engagements.
Yeah, I've spoken at BTA events and I've spoken at other events and so forth. But where, just to use your word, monetization and all that is where I really understood the power behind this is once we started the Selling from the Heart podcast and started to get an audience that went well beyond the copier channel. I learned a lot about this is when my book had come out. And this goes to the fall of 2018. And I remember having a conversation, Ray, with a near and dear friend of mine, Mark Hunter. Mark Hunter wrote the book, Mind for Sales. He wrote the book, High Profit Prospecting. A lot of the people on the channel know Mark Hunter. They've probably read his books. It was the day after my book came out. And he goes, if you really want to take your business to the next level, learn how to monetize and bring your book to life.
Yep.
And that goes back, 2.5 years ago. And I just took chapter by chapter, Ray, my book, and I brought it to life.
Well, you have to.
I humanized the book and I engaged with my audience to build a complete business around selling from the heart.
Which is, and at the end of the day, I keep telling people, you could do stuff for nothing for so long, but we're all in this world to we have to produce. We have to produce for ourselves and obviously to support our family. So there has to be a monetization to it. We don't do things just for the fun of it.
But I will key in on something you just said. I'm a big believer you must give stuff away because the more you give, the more you'll get. But I remember the very beginning, Ray, and I'm going in, the first year, there was a lot of stuff that I did that I didn't make a dime on. But I invested in it because, I'm a big believer if you don't invest, you'll never collect.
No, Larry, I was writing articles for probably 2 years. And then someone from China reached out to me, David Gibbons, took me all over the world based on the content that I was writing, and posted on LinkedIn. And from there, I started getting a little bit more and more exposure, allowed me to build, test through the innovation channel, all that stuff. So, there is an investment of time, but I think, a lot of people just they're not clearly defining their purpose. I think you've clearly defined your purpose. Everybody knows your purpose. And if you don't clearly define your purpose, and you don't really have the goals behind that purpose, you end up just kind of wallowing out there. And social media is a place that you can wallow. There's no doubt about it. And whatever your motives are in social media, there should be a reason for it. And I know that me and you have had quite a few in-mails about social media, and we kind of joke around back and forth about some of the stuff that's going on out there. But how do you see, now you're kind of the outsider, but you were an insider, so you're kind of halfway in and out of that channel. How do you see the channel today from a social media perspective?
Oh, wow. I think it's completely all over the map. And when I say all over the map, I'm going to be polite when I say this is social's a great positioning tool. It's a great conversation piece. It's a great engagement piece. But what it is not, it's not a pontification place. And it's not something, what I always tell people, Ray, is you're either in or you're out. You're either going to go all in this or just don't bother, right? There's a lot of people that'll dip their toe in the water with this.
I love the
people. What's that?
I love the people that'll say this, I don't have time for social media. Well, they're over there combing through their CRM to see whose lease they're going to prematurely go upgrade.
Well, yeah, but it's so funny. They don't have time to be on social, but
Yeah,
yet their clients and their prospects and their whole
hmm,
marketplace hangs out on social. They
pretty much.
communicate on social. They're leaving clues on social,
Hmm.
but yet is the channel listening to the clues that their customers and prospects are putting out there for them to turn that into conversations.
Hmm.
So, and you and I have had some deep, deep, deep conversations about this over
Hmm.
the years. And, what I'd really like for the channel to really key in on is not only position yourself really well as that subject matter expert, but I'm gonna say something, and this isn't a disrespect by no means. We must stop talking about the things that we've been talking about
Hmm.
for year after year after year after year after year because it becomes noise and nobody wants to
Hmm.
pay attention to it.
Hmm.
And I mean, and I grew up in the channel, and the channel was good to me. It provided wealth for myself, my family, and it launched me into what I'm doing right now. But there's one thing that I keyed in on, and I taught myself social. I coached my own self on social.
Hmm.
I spoke about the things in my marketplace that nobody was speaking about. I didn't post pictures of shiny copiers. I didn't post company propaganda. What I did is I posted information that I knew my ideal clients and my
Hmm.
target market would communicate on. I thought like an executive, I thought like a mid-level decision maker, and I educated people, I engaged people, and I excited people into conversation. That's what the channel needs to do. It's not talking about things that we've been talking about
Hmm.
for year over year and expecting different results. It's not going to happen.
Well, or it's a billboard. I mean, we were laughing at the very beginning of the COVID. Every single dealer out there flashing all over LinkedIn. They're selling masks and sanitizer. Obviously, there's a place for that. There's a place to communicate that with your
Sure.
customer. But and I think I was digging a long time ago. I used the comment, stop calling it social selling because it's confusing people, and it was really about social engagement. But it's just like you said a little while ago. When you engage with the president of a big huge corporation that's in your marketplace, and you're starting to understand what's important to that executive, you start to see him posting where he donates his money and his causes in the town, and you're starting to find some things that you have in common with him. And it just makes the conversation so much easier. You send them an email through LinkedIn, you start an engagement while all your cohorts and your competitors in the marketplace are trying to sell them a duplexer. I mean, so so there is a lot to social media, and I really wish our channel would pay more attention to it. It is a little disturbing because of all the verticals that I support in my channel. And if you look at a sales rep in the copier channel, all the groups they're in, they all have to do with the imaging channel.
Sure.
They're, you know,
Sure.
they're not thinking maybe I should join the restaurant association group, learn about that business hospitality. Maybe I should join this group about auto dealerships and really understand the auto business. And so if social media is so powerful, especially with LinkedIn, there's so much out there and available for us to consume as salespeople. But there's so much knowledge about your prospects they're never going to find in a CRM. It's just amazing to me that they don't use it more.
No, it's yeah, absolutely correct. And here's what I'd like for the channel to really think about. And what's interesting is I was listening to what you were saying is if you look at what the channel posts, and this again, this isn't a dig, this
Mm-hmm.
is just pure observation,
Mm-hmm.
is a vast majority of everything that people post in the channel is consumed, commented, and liked by people in the channel,
Mm-hmm.
which means the community is really small and myopic.
Mm-hmm.
So what I'd like for the channel to think about is start building those communities. Start building a community of your ideal clients. Start building a community of your clients. Start building a community of people that you would like to communicate to and start educating them.
You're right. And sometimes that education we talked about in this very beginning could be totally outside of what you do for a living. And you're
Absolutely,
making an
100%.
investment, you're making an investment for those prospects to take you a little bit more serious or look at you in a different way. It's all good stuff, Larry. I think, it's fun to watch what the progression of social media. Now obviously video's been huge. It's getting bigger and bigger every day. I've switched from really writing to doing the videos. I love doing them. It's fun. But I will warn everybody out there. I have never ever concerned myself with the actual engagements, the likes or the comments too much. I really wanted to make sure that my message was going out there. I could be pretty controversial. And so as a great example, I don't think anybody from Konica, even though they might have appreciated the message that I had the other day, is going to go on my post and say, great message, Ray. Yeah, Konica is in trouble. I mean, they're not going to do that. So it's not really the point of chasing a bunch of likes. And I think a lot of folks get hung up on that. And I know, you know, when I watch your content and I watch how you deliver your content and how you engage with people, that's never been about that for you. I'm going to be consistent at what I do. My audience is there. Some of my audience will engage me. Some of them just sits back and listens from afar. And, you know, and a lot of that is true for a lot of people that are posting. It's easy to go grab a whole bunch of likes, put a picture of a puppy, you know, licking a lollipop, and, you know, everybody in the world's going to like it. It's not going to move you forward. It's not going to give you any content that's going to be relevant to your prospects. So that was just my warning. And I see a lot of folks out there trying to do that. They're trying to figure out how to get people to like their stuff more than trying to figure out how to put relevant content out there so they can have a continued relevancy.
Oh boy! Now you've got me fired up, because a near and dear friend of mine would always say this: you can't take likes, comments, and shares to the bank. You can't cash those things.
Absolutely.
But what you can do is you can take the conversations that you start to the bank.
Absolutely.
Because we all know that nothing in sales happens without starting a conversation with somebody. So if all you are doing is going out and posting things on social and getting excited about the likes and the comments, and you're not doing anything with it, then to me, that's just social graffiti. And there's social graffiti all over the place.
All over the place. No, you're right.
All over the place.
You put the post out there, and then you tag 97 people on top of it, hoping they'll all see it and go in there and do something with it, which is even worse, because then if they don't engage, it kind of looks silly, you know. Hopefully our channel's listening to us talking, Larry. Obviously, you know, I always tell people this, you know, if people are on social media and they're making a living with the use of social media, you probably ought to listen to what they might be saying. If people are on social media and they're the so-called experts on social media, but they don't know how to monetize it, or they're not making a living on it, it's just a hobby for them. And, you know, it could be a hobby. Maybe that's what people want, but clearly defined, it's just a hobby. But if you really want to move the needle in your business, both personally and professionally, there's no better place. I mean, could you imagine, and I'll ask you this, I'm a little older than you, but could you imagine in the very beginning of your career, day 1 or 2, that you had the power with technology that we have today?
Oh, Ray, it's absolutely insane.
I can't even imagine.
Both of us, we started our career pre-internet, right?
Oh yeah.
So if I wanted to find out anything about Ray, I either had to go to the library, right? So back then, Google was the library.
Pretty much.
And if I wanted to know something about you, either I looked it up at a library, or I picked up the phone, or I engaged in a conversation with you.
Yep.
And that's where I think I have this saying that what's forever old is forever new. It's the things that I learned early on in my career in the late 80s still play out today. The tools have changed, but the core foundation of everything that we do in sales, my opinion, is about building relationships and changing the way people think. We were doing that in the 80s, the 90s, the 2000s, but we had to adapt to the tools.
Well, we were able to do it with more people today. Back in those days, you were rifle focused on maybe 10 people. It took you a month and a half to really get the focus you could get today with 1,000 people. You could only get the focus with 10 in those days. So it is interesting times. And like I said, I would wake up sometimes thinking, man, if I had all these tools back then, would have been a different life. Of course,
totally, completely different. I absolutely agree.
It's all a path toward, someday when we're long gone, people will say, could you imagine? Look at this video Larry and Ray did. God, this antiquated technology. Larry, it's always great talking to you. Is there anything you want to say before we end this?
Pardon me?
Anything you want to add before we end this?
I would just say this, that it's one of my favorite sayings, and I think this applies specifically into the channel, is growth and comfort. They don't go hand in hand. Nope. They don't play very well.
Nope, you put that.
And I want us to think about that. Yeah. If you truly want to grow in the world that we're living in today, you can't be afraid to try new things. You're never going to be able to learn something new. You're never going to be able to grow your business if you're afraid to try new things.
Yeah. Well, a lot of times it's the insecurity of their place in the future that keeps us, you know, so focused on how we can continue doing what we've always done. And that's just not going to work, especially in our industry, which is in a massively ripe for disruption, as we can see all around us right now. Larry, it's so good having you on, because we both know this: status quo is the killer of all that'll be invented. Don't get stuck in status quo. We'll see you all tomorrow.